Hi everyone.
Hi.
This is Art Lessons, and let's be clear up front, we are not going to teach you how to make art. We are here to provide our lived experience of how to live as a human who makes art.
Or as a sexy robot who makes art. We want to introduce ourselves individually?
Yes. I'm Rust.
I'm L, or L Font.
And together we are MMIX.
Yes. And we're multi-genre artists. We've done performing art genres. We've done videography and music video work. We have done digital glitch art. That's our primary medium. And
we've also done immersive theater.
Yes.
In-house production. I have done audio drama, scripted audio dramas, as far as writing, production, directing, acting.
And as you know, I have some background in a lot of different performing arts genres as well. Have been doing dance genres since I was really young. I had about a 16-year career in Middle Eastern dance. I've done a little bit of burlesque and variety, and lately over the past few years I have turned to different genres of comedy, primarily stand-up, but I have a little bit of experience with improv. So what do we want to talk about today? We had a specific topic.
So today, to kind of kick off this series, we want to talk about having a routine as an artist, having some sort of regular praxis as far as putting in the time to creation, to honing your craft, to furthering your education, whether that be actual classes, whether that be going down YouTube rabbit holes, or whether that's just taking time to fiddle around and give yourself a chance to be bad at something for a while. There's all different ways to continue learning how to be better at what you do and how you express yourself artistically.
There are lots of different ways to go about that. Obviously, with anything like this, with any practice, there's no single one right way. And we also want to acknowledge that people's brains work differently. What really solidifies a practice or causes a light bulb moment for one human may really not be as effective for another person. And as all of these conversations about neurodiversity and neurodivergence have come up that are very kind of in the pop culture mainstream lately, we want to bring that up too, because there really is never one size fits all. But this is just going to be a pool of ideas or bullet points for you to maybe look at within setting up a regular artistic practice.
So let's just dive right in. I don't want to add any more prefaces, sort of like when you try to look up a recipe and you just want the recipe and it makes you read through 7 pages.
A weird blog. Well, why don't I start with one of the talking points? A lot of you are familiar with the text of The Artist's Way and this idea of morning pages. So The Artist's Way was originally a book by Julia Cameron, and that is a great jumping off point. I will say that some of the other things discussed later on in some of her work, it's important to note that some of those practices do very much come from a place of privilege, but morning pages for most people are a relatively accessible thing. It just involves the discipline of budgeting some time every day, somewhere in your day. Mornings are really powerful in that, like, that's a strong kind of like brain vomit type of day when the brain weasels and the hamster wheel like isn't going as loudly for most people.
That actually tied into the thing that I was trying to say, which is that when engaging with the act of creating, the less decisions that you have to make, the better your art's going to be. So if you come home at the end of the day and you try to make art, you might be successful. But you also have made about 1,000 decisions already that day. And so the decisions that you make from that point onward are going to be a little less good than if you had done it at maybe early o'clock.
That's a really good point. And at the same time, we can also recognize that for some people, there are stronger work times of the day for them.
Yeah, totally.
Or rhythms or cycles that work the best for them. So if you're an evening person or a nighttime person, or as another example, have some kind of like chronic physical condition that I know with a lot of people like tends to get stronger later in the process of your day, you might want to plan out for that, and of course based on other things in your work and daily schedule as well. But yeah, on the other side of that coin is you can validly recognize that there are just better times of day for you to work during. But yeah, general morning pages or placing that practice somewhere in your day where it can effectively take place for you to pump out like 2 to 3 pages of writing.
Find what works for you is the bottom line there. Find whether or not mornings work for you, afternoons work for you. If you have the ability to create art in the middle of the day. Sometimes for me, doing stuff really late at night works out really well, because my brain is so tired that I'm not actually making decisions and I'm more open to a sense of play, a sense of improv, and I get into a different type of flow state than I would if I was, consciously putting forth a plan and setting out to create something specific first thing in the morning. It definitely feels like 2 different types of creation for me.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I remember when in my dance life, I was in the place of needing to learn and rehearse multiple choreographies. I was in much the same position of usually getting better results if I ran those rehearsals like at the end of my day. So yeah, but it just kind of depends on the situation, depends on your genre, and depends on a variety of other factors, obviously.
Yeah, like obviously if you're a musician and your instrument requires a lot of loud noise to be made, you're not going to want to do your morning pages while all of your apartment neighbors are asleep around you, because that's just not very kind.
Yeah, well, and most apartment buildings have something like a noise curfew.
Walls,
well, they have a noise curfew at
curfews.
least a lot of the time.
Yeah, so there's, after a certain point, like if you can work with headphones, awesome, then that's, great. Another thing I want to bring up on this, in kind of goes hand in hand with morning pages, is something that I would call mobile pages. And what I mean by that is, if at all you can find a way to practice your art on the go while you're out and about, do it. Whether that be, writing your novel in a blank text document on your phone, whether that be finding music apps to create sound sketches. That's how I came up with like 65% of guillotine. If you are a digital artist or photographer, use the phone in your pocket. The cameras are good now. Obviously, you can lug around your expensive camera if you have one, but the one in your pocket, I'd say 70% of time will capture what you need just fine. And it will help you get practice because your options are limited. Sometimes not having infinite resources can make you more creative, and push out some things that maybe your brain would just cycle over trying to make the right decision over and over again, if you had access to those things all the time.
Yeah, decision fatigue can be real, and having some restrictions or a prompt or something like that can be really helpful. But we will probably touch on that idea in another episode.
That is going to be a whole other episode, because there's so much we can talk about with that.
Yeah.
But the bottom line is find a way that you can make your art every day, even when you don't feel like it. Don't wait for inspiration, just set aside the time and do it, especially when you don't feel like it, because that's going to make it easier to push through when you don't feel like it next time and the time after that.
Another element that can help you in your daily or regular practice of some kind is just setting an intention for your day, or maybe setting one or two smaller or achievable art-related or creativity-related goals for that particular day. That can be really powerful. And back to what Rust was saying just a little bit earlier, it is important to budget daily time for your practice, but you can also start to flesh out either a weekly or a monthly schedule if your practice is contingent on external factors or other people. So obviously, if you need to hold a rehearsal that involves other humans or other sexy robots, you'll have to converge your schedules and figure out what's going on with that. And sometimes it's necessary that practice be a little less frequent, because most people have some difficulty syncing their schedules up a lot of the time. That's, one of those takeaway experiences from being in the creative arts, that like scheduling and logistics are half the battle some of the time.
Definitely.
But it is still important to view the weekly or monthly commitments as a discipline as well. For me, with my stand-up comedy practice, I often have a bare minimum of the number of open mics I make myself go to per week. Very, very bare minimum. I have at least one mic, and if it's a good week, I go to 2 or 3. So yeah, looking at the commitments weekly and monthly in larger cycles than just in your day-to-day is really important as well.
And treating your practice like it's a job or like it's your homework, in that it has to happen, is really, really important. We have a weekly MMIX meeting. There's no canceling, really. We've maybe had to push it a day forward or backward.
It is like certain male performing artists. There is no canceling it.
Oh, wow.
When you're an artist or professional creative, or just a creative or a performer, at some point in time, it is more likely that you'll have to make the decision as to whether or not you want to do your craft or take your art in front of the public. And when that happens, and this is probably a bigger topic, again, that we'll get into in a later episode, but when that happens, you will need to also make the decision along the lines of like practicing your art regularly, how many public gigs on a regular basis you want to do. And I feel like this is a very important conversation because this is where the topic of burnout starts to enter, and the sort of very current capitalistic topic of a term that I've heard called the attention economy. And this drive, this feeling that a lot of us artists and performers have, that we need to stay in front of everybody's eyes and captivating their attention thirstily 24/7 and just churning out content. And this is a really important topic to consider. We as MMIX are actually in a place of attempting to find a little more balance with that. Some for external reasons that are just kind of a product of like Russ School's situation right now, but some based on feedback that we got. Extremely kind and compassionate friends gave us feedback that some of our output during like the first year and a half of kind of early pandemic was
too much.
Almost to the point of oversaturation. We have some very beloved friends who we respect greatly as artists and performers. And they're out there making money and making their living that way and being extremely professional, but their approach is quite workaholic as well. It is something we see quite a bit with our peers and with our community that we look at a lot of the time. And again, no judgment. Everybody has to put food on the table in some way, but especially part of my personal interest as of the past couple years has been, how can we maintain the joy in our artistic practices and maintain it as an actual creative practice and not something that just completely turns into an automated, like, sloggy job.
For sure.
Where we feel like not the good kind of robot.
Yeah. and your body will let you know when you're pushing yourself too hard. When there's a constant ache in your body and you feel like your brain is mush all the time, and you try to push those sensations and those feelings down so that you can push through and keep going and do the thing, because you feel like if you just get this piece of content out to like 100, 1,000 more people, that your life will be better. Listen to your body. I can't stress that enough, because if you don't, it will get louder and louder, and eventually it will get loud enough that you can't ignore it, and by that point in time there'll be a lot of things wrong. And your doctor will wonder why you didn't come in sooner. So this kind of goes hand in hand with the idea of work-life balance. For some of you, art may be your work. For some of you, art may be your life. For some of you, it may be both. And that's fine. Either way. But it is important to have breaks. It is important.
Please rest.
It is important to get the rest that you need. And if you are resting and you don't feel rested, see a doctor. Because that is, again, implicative of some something deeper going on, and your body is trying to tell you something. So please just take care of yourself. I know the tortured artist is a really great meme, and we're all, sad and mopey and outcasts and dress weird and fuck you. But at the end of the day, romanticizing the idea of suffering is not healthy and is not a good way to be an artist, and will not produce happiness for you.
Okay, so the final major point that we would like to touch on today as far as securing a regular artistic practice is figuring out how to create a budget for whatever falls under the category of materials. Now, for some people like performing artists, that might mean continuing education. It might mean things like costuming or performer shoes, special
Paint supplies,
footwear.
canvas.
Yeah, for visual artists, obviously.
Software, plugins,
apps.
replacement computers, replacement phones.
Paying for fucking Adobe.
Yeah, all the subscriptions that you have to pay for now. Buying new lenses for your camera, buying a new synthesizer, buying new lighting equipment, buying, a better car so that you can go do location shoots. You need to figure out a way to build up toward these purchases, so that you can level up your craft.
And drilling down on exactly how to do this is something we'd like to get into in a later video. So definitely stay tuned to this series because we'd like to talk more about this.
Yeah. But one thing that we can speak to is our experience with setting up a subscription type service like Patreon, and how even a small monthly amount can add up to some bigger and really great ways to level up.
There are also still, depending on where you live, grants and micro grants available for independent artists. For some of these larger grants, yes, it might be necessary that you are organized as some type of a company or a nonprofit, but a lot of them, especially slightly smaller amounts, are available to just people who are independent creators. So you might want to spend time not just doing some research on this topic, but perhaps liaising with other artists in your geographical area, or maybe artists who are connected by a commonality of life experience. There are various social media based groups out there, and things like that you can explore to try to further your access to these things.
And grants, applying for grants is one of those adulting things that seems really daunting, but it's like filling out a job application, except you don't have to interview. Like, that's the really cool part. Like, you get it or you don't, and that's fine, because when you get it, it's like, oh great, $1,000. I don't have to leave the house to get that $1,000 because they just send it to you.
But as far as a note about grant application accessibility, we have to remember not everybody has the background in writing and literature that you and I do. So if that's not something that comes to you as easily, again, this goes back to connecting with other local artists and creators in your community. Maybe there's somebody in your community who would be willing to proof what you wrote while keeping your voice to the piece. Or to contribute their skills, or to do a trade for services that might help you with your application for the grants.
We will go into a lot of these topics much further and more intricately as this series continues. But we have reached the end of this episode, so thank you for sticking around. We hope that you have gleaned something that can be useful to you. We hope we have provided value.
Well, what we really want to say about this is it's important to us to render this type of community support in a way that is not hyper monetized. As I said earlier in this video, it's appealing to me to just find more expansive ways to breathe into all of the work that we do as people and as artists that isn't just absorbed in this process of trying to extract the maximum amount of money from our peers.
Yeah.
We want to try to give something back to the world in a balanced way that is hopefully useful. And nobody's information is perfect or one size fits all, but we hope that you'll be able to take a few pieces of this at least to help yourself out.
When we first came up with the idea for this series, Elle got really excited because I think both of us felt a desire to output something that wasn't just something for the algorithm. We want to connect with people on a deeper and more meaningful level. And right now our schedules don't really allow for a whole lot of in-person interaction to allow us to do that. Social media seems to be crumbling beneath its own feet, and I don't really need to cite a whole lot of examples for that.
Yeah.
So
gestures widely at everything.
Yeah. So we wanted to find a way to interact with people and talk intelligently and genuinely about what it's like to live as people who make art professionally and the joys that can bring, as well as some of the really, really hard times that we go through to try to make that happen in a way that keeps the roof over our heads. So thank you for being here. We hope to see you again next time.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye.
And damn it, I lost it again.
Face is so itchy.
Blooper reel.
That'll be like the one outtake we put after the little credit.